This is GIMI Productions on the track.
What's up, everybody? This is Case Study QB, and this is the Political Junkies, and we're here with our guest, our first guest. You know, it only had to be right that we would get our guy from the MCSC network, Niko House. Go ahead and say what's up to the people, Niko.
What's up, everybody? I miss you guys. I know it's been a hot minute since I've been back on camera, but first video back had to be with my man Case Study because it's been like never. And this has been a relationship that has been going on for a long time.
Definitely.
And I really appreciate all the different nuance that you bring to the conversation, just by exposing people with their own words, man. You gotta love that. I love using people's own words.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Definitely. So with that said, you know, we got Carlito, we got Gabe, we got John, and we're going to get this party started. So the first topic, name some creeping executive power, especially from Bush to Trump, and how to reverse them. Your ideas on how we can pull it back.
The first one, I think that's been around for a bit since the Obama era, is the National Defense Authorization Act. And what is that? Summary is the ability for the military to hold anyone considered a 9/11 terrorist without any charges, without any trial. So it's something that, you know, has been debated. How far can that go? So is it right now? It's just limited to terrorists, but what does it take to be qualified as a terrorist? There's been some arguments about the protesters in Portland and the barricades and them being treated by unmarked vehicles. Is that related to this? That's not determined right now, but it's a very slippery slope. Once you say somebody's a terrorist, it only takes one little amendment to broaden that terrorism scope. So how do we reverse that? It just comes to people agreeing with the right that everybody, regardless of what kind of criminal you are, has the right to charges and the right to a trial. It's a very simple principle that's been around since, you know, the last several centuries. So we have to, if we're to throw somebody in jail, it's our duty as Americans to try them and to give them their charges.
Yeah, pretty much since the Magna Carta, all the way back to England.
So I think was part of that particular part of that NDAA was actually the same clause that they used to hold Chelsea Manning without any reason recently, just because she wouldn't retestify against Julian Assange. She was being legally tortured. The United Nations actually had to step in. There was a secret grand jury that had been put together that nobody really had access to any of the documents. It was recently dissipated, thank God. But so basically their logic is, if we consider you a terrorist, which is basically by their definition anybody they consider a threat to national security, foreign or domestic, they can hold you without cause, without reason, and without giving you any time frame as to when they can release you. And because of that, Chelsea Manning was held in jail for another year and some change in solitary confinement, and then given I think a $3,000 fine every single month she was in jail. So like they fined her for being in jail because of this act. Under Obama, people were disappearing in Baltimore and Ferguson. People were being harmed in Standing Rock. Obviously the military weaponized, but there are people, feds, probably private contractors like the one we're seeing in Portland, that are literally kidnapping people and were kidnapping people in Ferguson. So this is something that not only is problematic, but it's being used. It's not just, they didn't just pass it just to pass it. Like, it's being used right now. And it is truly one of the scariest, because it basically says due process doesn't exist. And that's just simply not the case. Or at least it's not supposed to be.
Carlito. Yeah,
so the topic that I chose was something that I first heard about during the Bush years, especially with Cheney. It's called the unitary executive theory. And from John Dean, he was a lawyer for Nixon. He said, in its most extreme form, unitary executive theory can mean that neither Congress nor the federal courts can tell the president what to do or how to do it, particularly regarding national security matters. And that's been used since Nixon, Bush, Obama, Trump. Everybody has used it, and it's just been escalated. And this is the reason why Bush thought that he could get away with torture, and why John Woo said that if the president deems that he's got to torture somebody, including by crushing the testicle of the person's child, there is no law that can stop him.
Wow.
So this is where all these laws that the president thinks they could overstep boundaries, they all extend from this. And now having Bill Barr, which was one of the disciples of I think it was under Bush 1, Richard Nix, he, along with the Federalist Society, are basically trying to take over all federal courts because they know that's the only way that they could be stopped. So the only way to really stop this is having good judges, man.
And we know that Trump got a lot of judges in, so that's going to be tough for a long time. So we touched on Bush. I got something from Obama where he overused the Espionage Act, especially on journalists. That's basically what he used it on more than, I believe, any of the previous presidents combined.
Right.
So basically it's a law where you would declare that the journalist is a spy and you're able to charge them when they're just doing regular journalism. And then I want to throw in Trump real quick, where recently he diverted money. So the Congress has the power of the purse, and the power of the purse is they can delegate where our taxpayer money goes to. And Trump, he reappropriated money that was supposed to go to the Department of Defense, and he reappropriated to the war. So that's something that is rarely done, or actually, I don't know if it's ever been done before by a president, but it's something that he shouldn't have done, and that's a way that he's grabbing executive power.
I just say that's just crazy that they can take money from the DOD whenever they feel like building a damn wall, but they can't take money from the DOD when it comes to passing healthcare legislation or giving us unemployment.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it was quick. Yeah, we're gonna build this wall that don't need no food, don't need no water, ain't got no bills, ain't got no kids. But we're gonna get that money to the wall.
and then you see Pelosi and crew, like they gave him a budget increase for the military without even asking for it. He didn't even ask for more money for the military, and they were like, "Here you go. Here's a budget increase for that."
Yeah, I think that's why it's so hilarious when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer pretend like they don't like Trump. Like
that's why they had to get rid of Bernie from getting the nomination, because he would have won, and now he would have been the executive with all that power. And he could literally probably reappro money to Medicare for all, to the Green New Deal, to universal child care, to universal housing for the homeless. He would have, he probably, even though we know Bernie, I don't think he's that strong. I think he would have been like, I got to work with Chuck Schumer. I got to work with Nancy Pelosi. But if we get
he works with the military-industrial complex a little bit too much too.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we get a Nina though, or somebody to outsider to be progressive, that would be very, very interesting.
If Nina was chief of staff, it would be the best. It would be the best administration. If Nina was not, but it's like, because the other alternative reality is Jeff Weaver, chief of staff. Which would be terrifying.
Oh no!
It would literally. It might be worse than a neoliberal presidency, because it'll be a bunch of people getting even progressives to think that we're getting stuff done when they're really just stabbing us in the back the whole time. Like
Obama. Many of the missteps of Bernie's campaign have been traced back to Jeff Weaver.
Woo! Man,
that's a whole nother stuff. We gotta move on. That's a whole nother book. That's a whole nother show.
Really quick. It's just go back, to your point about, the Trump putting money to the military. Like, he took the money for the wall. So, Democrats would tell us, the whole establishment say, we're not going to pay for the wall. He went ahead, make his executive order, give the money, and then say, Nancy and Chuck, we're just going to increase your budget so you could do it again. And voters were not, question it. And so in reality, they are building the wall, but it's not like they're voting for it. And, people would think that's like, Trump didn't get his wall, but Trump is going to end up getting his wall because.
Yeah, Trump did. That was the whole standoff. Like, literally, it was Trump getting his wall money and then the Dreamers Act getting passed, staying intact. And that's literally what happened. People don't know, the MAGAs were cheering, we're standing our ground because Trump is a winner. And the liberals were like, Nancy Pelosi and Schumer are fighting for immigrants. And it was fight against the wall. And then that's not what happened, actually. Everybody, literally, Trump didn't get what he wanted. And Nancy Pelosi, supposedly, they didn't get what they wanted. Nobody won. Nobody got anything they wanted. What are y'all talking about? But everybody's winning, though.
Nisha, you mentioned the Dreamers, man. That's one of the when Republicans want to say something about executive overreach, the Dreamers Act, that's one of the things they point to about Obama. And, related to the unitary executive theory, that's one of the points that we're going to say about the wall, but also signing statements, because right now they take, Congress passes a law and the president goes, you know what, this is cool, but this section right here, I don't like that. I'm not going to abide by this section right here. So, I mean, there's a lot of overreach by both parties. Veto? Well, the signing statements, it's almost, to them, it's like a veto. It got to go to the Supreme Court eventually. Somebody wants to challenge them on that. But they basically put in when they sign the law, they do what amounts to a line item veto, but it really doesn't have the same power as a governor. But it could be challenged in court, though.
The next subject that we are going to discuss is the style of Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan and how it helps the progressive media.
We had this conversation too many times, probably me and Gabe, but about Joe Rogan, we talk about deplatforming. I do not agree with it, but there's a difference to me between deplatforming somebody and then having somebody that's a dishonest person coming into your show and you're spewing lies. So with Joe Rogan, Gabe likes to say that, he brings people in and he's open-minded and blah, blah, blah. But I'm saying somebody like Jordan Peterson, he had him at least 6 times. Dave Rubin at least 3 times. Ben Shapiro at least 3 times. How many times does it take to know that somebody is a charlatan? Especially in a show like Joe Rogan where he has money, producers, assistants. Even on the first episode that they have him on, they could do some research and see what they're all about. You could have him in, you could debate them, you could see what they're about or learn from them, But once, but I mean, but even once you have him one time and you realize, they ain't about nothing, why are you going to have him 5 more times? That's what I'm saying.
So there's a couple things. One, his show format is not a debate. It's not like the MSNBC shows. It's a long form interview where a lot of times he's sitting back and letting them talk. So you let them talk. Sometimes he'll ask probing questions, but you just gave the example of Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin's been on his show a couple of times. And what was the last time he just went on? He went on and Joe Rogan, without even trying, kind of made him run in circles and made him look terrible about libertarianism and, there's no government systems that work better than the private sector. He goes, or what about the post office? He's like, and what about building codes? And he's like, And this is a guy that Joe Rogan's he's a comedian. He's a comedian. He calls himself, he's a cage fighting commentator,
but this is something that somebody has been on at least 3 times.
Yeah, but it took him that long. This is somebody, he's a good guy. He's somebody that is an honest actor trying to meet these people, trying to learn. And it may take him, we're watching somebody grow over years in their political perspective and watching them grow as they talk to scientists, as they talk to politicians, he's a major person that gave Bernie a platform that he had never seen. Bernie probably got more converts from his appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast than on any other interview.
Okay. Well, how many converts did Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro get? If you just let him few, I mean, I understand he's not a politician. You could have a person in one time, they say your things, you learn, maybe you don't know everything they're talking about. All right. You trying to tell me you didn't learn anything for the second time and you just let them come back again and say the same lies? Come on now.
So can I answer that?
Yeah.
Can I answer that? So I think there's something to be said for what Joe Rogan has been able to do by having people like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin go on. Absolutely. Like, I think that everybody would agree that Dave Rubin's support has gone demonstrably, like, it's lower since that appearance that Gabe just talked about that. Since that appearance, people think that Dave Rubin's a dumbass. Like, nobody takes Dave Rubin seriously. And all Joe Rogan did was ask objective questions without any judgment, without any malice. And he basically uses this immense privilege that he has to completely disconnect his emotion from the interview. Now, sometimes, does that mean he has on people that we don't like to see very often? Of course, but that also means he demanded, like, he went out and reaching out because he couldn't find any good, honest leftists. So he says, well, who can I get on my show? People suggested Kyle Kalinske, Jimmy Dore, Abby Martin, and he listened and got all of those leftists on his show. And those are leftists that many consider fringe, that would otherwise not have a platform like that, but all of their platforms grew because of going on Joe Rogan's show, because the same crowd that some of them liked, a lot of them liked Dave Rubin, when they found out that basically Jimmy was an honest version of Dave Rubin, they realized this is a better place to be. They had that contrast, and that contrast was provided by the platform that Rogan gave them.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. The problem I have is, I mean, how many years have you known Dave Rubin was a joke? You know?
For a
How
while.
many years?
A lot of people didn't know, though.
Yeah, but I'm saying he had him multiple times, you know, so he knew about him. And like I said,
but where did
Dave
Rubin ever get a chance to get exposed?
Well, I mean, why does it take 3-4 episodes to get exposed over multiple years?
He probably wound him up. You know, he wants to bring him back and just like slowly, and then
slowly over that time, their presence grows. I mean, I listen to Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. All right.
All right. Let me jump in here because I want to talk about Jimmy Dore a little bit because I'm a big fan. Personally, I'm a fan of Jimmy Dore. I've been listening to him before he even joined TYT, but I do have some criticism of him. And one of the things that I criticize Jimmy Dore for is we all hate voter shaming, right? You know, people saying, oh, you're going to vote for Green Party, you're going to vote for this party or whatever. But he does the opposite. He shames people for wanting to work within the Democratic Party and wanting to try to have progressive change from within it. And I think, me personally, have all options on the table. If you feel passionate about starting a whole new party, I'm with that. Go ahead, do you. If you want to work within the Democratic Party, hey, do you. As long as we all trying to get the same goal, Medicare for all, universal child care, et cetera, et cetera.
So I mean, I would say that's a mischaracterization. He doesn't voter shame people for trying to work in the Democratic Party. What he does say is that it's insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So he'll say, yeah, he supports people progressives that are running in the Democratic primary. So he's on the side of change within the party, but at the same time, if we all go, I said in the last episode, if we go and give an overwhelming victory to Biden, it's not going to be, oh, let me give the progressives anything. It's going to be my centrist corporate platform worked, and they're not going to give us anything. They're not giving us anything out in the primary. So if you're going to say Jimmy Dore shaming, yeah, he's saying, you know, how can you vote for somebody who's not even giving you anything in words in the primary and then expect that you're going to change their heart and mind when they're in office? So I think it's a mischaracterization.
Jimmy, you could tell. I go through the same thing, but I'm 31. Jimmy's over 60, right? The things that Jimmy has seen as a comedian, as a commentator, are like 3 times what I've seen. And I'm already feeling exhausted. You can see it in his commentary. I'm going to tell you why. How do you think it feels for Jimmy to warn people about something 2-3 years in advance? We're talking about election integrity, basic election fraud that my shows cover, Convo Couches cover. This is fact-based, evidence-based election fraud issues and election integrity issues before we get into the election. He's warning people who are giving hundreds of millions of their hard-earned dollars that they really can't afford to give to Bernie Sanders. He's warning people, before you do, just hold him accountable and make sure he's going to fight to make sure that your voice is heard and your vote is counted. And people then ignore him but give him the money anyway, which made Bernie feel like he had a license to ignore something like that. There, in the context of this all going on in the Democratic primary that we already saw was corrupt, right? Bernie doesn't fight it. That's why Jimmy is screaming at the top of his lungs, and people think that it's counterproductive to shame. No, he's not saying don't work with the Democratic Party at all. He's saying that it's not possible based off the evidence, but what he is saying that is, how can people that we claim to be allies and good actors take our dollars that they know we can't afford to give and work it within a party without really substantively attempting to change it or making the sacrifice or calling out the people that you know you need to call out to make that change. So what Jimmy is doing is really prophetic. I mean, yeah, it's a kind of obvious outcomes, but it's prophetic in the sense that if we've started paying attention to holding people accountable then we might get different results now. But nobody wanted to hold him accountable because everybody was too busy hero worshiping no matter what they're doing.
That's a great point.
I mean, the name of the show, Political Junkies. The thing I have to say about this is that I am no expert. I'm like a noob at this, man. And I know a whole lot more than most of my friends when talking about politics. A lot of people just don't know. They don't have the time. They don't have the energy. They don't know what's going on. So some of the comments that I made, not necessarily Jimmy, but sometimes people just blame people. Why are you being so stupid and going against your own interests, stuff like that? Some people, they just don't know. They just see what they, maybe.
But Jimmy isn't talking to them. He makes it very clear. I'm talking to the people who actually have seen all of this, seen all the facts, are deep in this politics, and still make the wrong decision, despite the majority of the left saying they only make decisions based off of policy and what they can
Well, we
get.
know a lot
factual.
They have self-interest in mind when they go into politics, man. I mean, we talked like the episode about Colin Allred. So we know a lot of people go in saying one thing, but they don't mean it.
Yeah, but that's always the conversation that we have, right? Especially with like some of the Bernie folks, right? Like I'm a Bernie guy and stuff like that, but people want to just give him a pass to be like, oh no, like we always go at it. Like Bernie has he ran a bad campaign and he has like a lot of blame to happen. And so that's, Jimmy said, well, he did it, in 2016, he fought harder than 2020. And you told us.
Joe's his friend.
And you, like I said, and we talked about what happened right when he got asked about the debate issue. He threw his friend who sacrificed her career with the DNC under the bus to defend the Democratic Party. And he thought that was going to get him voted. He propped up Russiagate, which propped up obviously Comey, Clinton, all these people that were eventually found guilty of basically malice intent or malicious intent. And then you throw everybody. Like, Yang didn't endorse Bernie. Why do you think? People will say it's because he's corrupt. Yeah, it's partially, maybe a little bit true, but no one else endorsed Bernie. Even Marianne Williamson, I think, took forever to really come out endorsing, and that was like, she got pressed on it. But Tulsi didn't endorse Bernie either. So you had a whole, just like Biden had a coalition that was willing to yield, you had a coalition that was willing to yield. But because you would rather capitulate to the Democratic Party, they either saw two options. It was either to rebel completely, of course, or well, we're going to have to get behind Biden too, because Bernie has already set this precedent to work within the Democratic Party or else. Because now you're going to get killed because of Bernie's, and this is what Jimmy talks about, by the way, because of Bernie and pushing the Democratic Party and Biden, and then the progressives getting behind Bernie, you're going to get killed by the Democratic Party and the progressives if you don't do what they say. And that's what's problematic and what Jimmy's trying to talk about.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you don't know. If you do know, people are still making the wrong decision.
I hate the fact that that Bernie didn't take Jesse Ventura's endorsement. Like that hurt me a little bit when I heard that Jesse said he offered it to him and he didn't take it. That's how I knew that Jeff Weaver and all these old people at the top of his campaign was definitely giving him
Why?
bad advice.
Because Democrats would have frowned on him, and their plan was to work within the Democratic Party.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Listen, Bernie ran one of the worst campaigns that I've seen. Like,
Nina 2024, baby. 2024.
Hello, somebody.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. Where do you see the future of progressive independent media and its effect on future elections?
I really like the evolution of progressive media. Before, it was really just like TYT and some unknowns, and now you got channels that are blowing up all over the place. And to me, it's like progressive media is playing the long game. You have the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox Newses that are like stuck in the now. Their viewership is 60 to 65 and up, and they're not really changing anything. They're still just doing advertisements, and they're support, and they're catering their news to protect the corporate sponsors. And in the background, you have this progressive media that's building up slowly, and they're grabbing the young mind share. So right now, if you ask people that are 30 and under, they're not watching MSNBC or CNN or Fox. They're watching their favorite indie media, whether it's on the left, whether it's on the right, or something in between. While it's going to take us a while, because right now these legacy media companies have a oversized influence on the elections, where if they don't back a candidate, they're able to push back on Bernie on Medicare for all with bad arguments and things like that. In 15, 20 years, if all goes according to plan, those legacy media are going to be exactly that, legacy. And then we'll have these young progressive outlets that at that point will become seasoned and doing real journalism, like Niko House, like Kyle Kalinske, like everybody that we've talked about on our past podcasts. Those are going to be the media of the future. So it's a long game. It's not something that's going to change overnight.
Let me throw this in there real quick, because I've been watching YouTube independent media for a long time, and I do remember back in 2008 or so, I was looking at, back then it was really dominated. TYT was big, and a couple I can't even think of anybody else at that time, but I remember looking at MSNBC's channel, like they didn't take YouTube seriously at all. And they literally had like 1,000 views and 1,000 subscribers and very low subscribership. Now you literally have YouTube feeding from independent media to the mainstream media. You see, they blew up like over a couple of years, having a lot of subscribers. Do you think, and this goes to anybody, do you think that they will be able to somehow hold on with the help of the algorithm?
You literally have to click do not recommend videos from this channel because of that problem. It would be like I'm watching Jimmy Dore, and then the next video is MSNBC, and then the next one CNN. So it's like I literally have to click do not recommend videos or do not autoplay videos from this channel.
Progressive independent media is a very interesting conversation as an insider, if you will, because we have a very, very unique effect on the entire political discourse and the events that may happen because of it. So I think at this point, everybody knows that after 2016, it's basically been like a slew of just progressive media that's blown up, like in a way that we never would have anticipated. Jimmy goes from being who's that old guy who's angry as hell on TYT to getting more views in the entire network. Kyle blows up, but on the other side of that, and I'm not going to say any names, but there are people who learn the lingo. They see what people want to hear and only that. They don't ever want to be contentious because it interrupts their profit, and they repeat that, and then they take it and they pretend like they emulate sincerity, but they're not actually being sincere. And then the moment that an election is over and it concludes, then they're just telling people, well, you got to go vote for Biden uncritically, right? So instead of then taking that and examining how we got to this point, it's always the next thing. It's always the next election. But it isn't just TYT, unfortunately. But that's the problem. It's a precedent TYT set, but it's also a precedent because of the way algorithms work. People have to kind of go with the popular conversation and get those, because YouTube is also hurting us when it comes to the monetization. But that's the problem. And so because of our power, we can also be the one thing stopping any real progress from taking place. Because you went from hero worshiping that one politician every 2 to 4 years to you have somebody that you watch loyally more so than any politician, or based on the politician that you support. So when independent journalists learn which politician you support, which is usually the most popular guy at the time, they will harp on that, and everything that person does for the most part is good. The bad you will never know about, so it creates a fissure in the discourse, because people, like I said, people think that Bernie's Medicare for all is even close to perfect, and it's not. There's a version better than that in the House that is never discussed, even though it's better. Because why? Bernie didn't introduce it. Did y'all know Bernie voted against the Green New Deal? Did y'all know that? Bernie voted against it because it didn't go far enough. But nobody wanted to. Why? Because AOC is a very popular politician that's gotten people a lot of views. So even though they disagree with her on a lot, I know people who are literally scared to put a negative video out about AOC because she affects their bottom line. They know that. Bernie affects their bottom line. They cannot criticize them substantively. You can't get mad at Bernie for not addressing election fraud, even though you have the apparatus to do so. You can't get mad at Bernie for calling Joe Biden the next FDR, because if Tulsi did that, right, she would have been crushed. If Marianne Williamson did that, she would have been crushed. If Andrew Yang did that, would have been crushed. Andrew Yang has never gone that damn far. Yeah, we got a problem with the way he endorsed him out of nowhere, but calling him the next FDR, what's the only reason you could think that that's a good idea? The Democratic Party told you to, and you want to stay under good graces. What does that make you? And yet, indie media will be silent on it. And that's scary because that has a reverberating effect throughout the rest of the entire political discourse and how events will happen going forward. So that's my take on that.
Well, didn't Yang say that he got promised a position? I think he said that in an interview.
No, they talked about. He said they talked about a position, but he basically talked about a position in everybody's campaign except for like one or two.
One of the fears I have with independent media is that we know the establishment is not going to go away quietly. The establishment, and some of the the things that you mentioned, Niko, I can see that if MSNBC, for example, sees a young upstart that's making a lot of noise, they just going to hire them, pay them off, buy their channel, whatever, and then they're going to go up that route, because we see it happen with politicians. It could happen with independent media as
Ben
well.
Dixon. That was Ben Dixon. That's Ben Dixon. Ben Dixon I wouldn't say he's up and coming, but he has like flares of popularity, but he's very good at marketing. And he has a pretty good apparatus because he used to run a church. So people don't even know this man was a huge Elizabeth Warren guy, criticizing Bernie over the dumbest shit. Like, it didn't make any sense if you're going to like Elizabeth Warren. But when he saw the tide turning, he latched onto it. But of course, it was a very general, tailored message that people have learned how to do. So I don't have to criticize Biden too much to boost Bernie, boost in my opinion. But then, of course, what does he do? Now I'm flipping to Biden. And you're more palatable. You're considered a progressive. So it creates this air of parity, right? So when he go, we have a progressive on here and liberals on here. But that's what happened. And Ben Dixon is not an honest actor, if I'm being frank. But he ends up on MSNBC. They send one of theirs down. People forget Sam Cedars an MSNBC contributor. He's been one for quite a long time.
He hosted All In last night with Chris Hayes. He hosted the whole show. Go ahead.
And think about it. He's in the same field, or the same, I would say his contemporaries basically with Jimmy, who he considers his biggest competition, who is, quite frankly, is his biggest competition. Jimmy is completely and totally honest. Sam Cedar is disliked by the people he's disliked by, but people that watch him will say, well, I think he's being honest. He's just wrong sometimes. And it's like, no, he's been very clear about what his goals are, but people want to ignore that because he likes Bernie. Like, yeah, he's wrong on just about every issue I genuinely care about. He shows no principles, no moral consistency, but he likes Bernie.
So let me ask you this question about,
I
want to ask this question about Sam Cedar, because I'm a uniter, not a divider, right? So I really want, I want all sides of the progressive media to somehow, we have our disagreements, but I want us to have value and add something to the progressive media. So let me ask you this question. I just said that he hosted the whole show on All In. Chris Hayes was out, which is usually in to getting your own show like a year or two. Look, you see what happened with Jen Giger. We see Joy Reid took advantage of filling in. Do you think it would be beneficial for him to host, eventually get his own show on a mainstream media platform? And I'll throw this out real quick. You see Joy Reid now coming along. I hate the fact that it took her so long, and I think it's disingenuous, but she is saying a lot of positive things about Medicare for All. Niko.
Yeah, she's saying a lot of positive things about Medicare for All because we have zero chance of getting it. She also liked Bernie at one point before he had any chance of winning the election. I mean, with Sam Cedar, Sam has been one of the many that have mastered this ability to pretend to be progressive as far as it can help your bank account. And Sam Cedar getting a show on MSNBC doesn't help us at all. In fact, there are situations where people forget just because somebody says something most of the time, or some of the time that's good, even though most of the time they're bad. And when they're being bad, they're being insincere, they're being disingenuous, and they know it. They're just simply gaslighting. Those people don't really get punished in any way as far as their viewership is concerned, not in any significant way. And it can often become a net negative for the progressive movement because they didn't have control over the narrative, because they've been fishing. They casted a wide net through deception and basically pop culture politics. They brought all these people in, and then you create like an air of loyalty and culture within you. That's just how YouTube works. And then what happens? Oh man, Tulsi Gabbard's a Hindu fascist who hates Bernie and is not a progressive on foreign policy. And in fact, she actually left the DNC for selfish reasons. That's what you get whenever a progressive built up that much credibility, because people ignore the fact that they were wrong on Russiagate. They were wrong about Julian Assange. They say nothing on Chelsea Manning. You had one progressive who actually smeared Jill Stein, and nobody really knows about it because I'm the only one that covered it. Yes, smeared Jill Stein when the only choices were Clinton and Trump. Yes. This is what happens, right? And but they're wrong about all that. Everything we all agree on as a baseline concept, they're wrong about all that. But they say one thing right about the person that you like, and one thing wrong about the person you had some reservations on, and you're like, I'm sold, that's it. And that becomes a dominant conversation. So it could be a net negative when you have a person cast that wide of a net and they're not being genuine.
I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna push back real quick. Hold on, John, because I just I hear your point. You have a great point, but I'm thinking about getting new voices into the ether, right? So let's say Sam is on the show. I think Bernie was supposed to be on the show. He probably canceled, but I could tell which direction that he was going in as far as his guests. You have more opportunities for maybe you have a Noam Chomsky on. Maybe you have these progressive people.
I don't know if I want Noam Chomsky on right now.
I hear you. But the point I'm trying to make is that he having one person with their foot in the door, and let's say you give him a rating. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Give Sam Cedar a rating of his
3.
progressivism from, let's
3.
say, from an A to F.
Oh man, F is the worst, right?
Yeah.
D.
The
I'm gonna say J.
So compared
only because
to
he's good on with some progressive candidates.
yeah, so compared to let's say what's the guy that says that he glorified the bombs? That Brian Williams, you know what I'm saying? Compared to that dude, I know he's an F, right? Brian Williams is an F.
That's not that much of a difference though.
No, Cole Wallace is an F. You know,
but that's not. But okay, here's
so you think they're just one
here's
step
the difference
above
between
them?
D and F.
Okay.
Let me tell you what the difference between D and F is. F is, yeah, I want to bomb your country. Yeah. D is, I pretend like I don't want to bomb your country, but everything I spew and everybody I support says otherwise. Because so either way, the country gets bombed because you've okayed it, basically. So that's the D and the F, which means there's really no difference. That's my point. Sometimes progressive media that is clearly disingenuous, but people want to ignore it because everybody wants to believe in this world that doesn't exist, like where people do stuff for money and that it's because they're genuine and they care about things. That's a very rare thing. They've never had to give up anything to be, and it's a consistent pattern. They've never had to give up anything to be part of this movement. Like when it was at its peak, they didn't have to sacrifice. Like I gave up law school, Fiorella gave up acting, Pasta gave up managing a huge restaurant in LA, Johnny gave up engineering, Jamaro gave up his job in DC, even Tim Black gave up his comedian gig, Lee gave up multiple movies and multiple comedy deals, and he just happened to land the job at RT eventually. Like these people understood before the money was there how important these issues were to fight for. You take somebody for like Sam Cedar, who was in Sex and the City, was hosting on MSNBC. He's never been broke his entire life. These issues have never really affected him. So how could we expect for him to not take opportunity to take advantage of our movement when that's clearly all he's ever known? That's all he's ever been. It's been successful for him. So why change it? The negatives aren't going to affect me. Hell, every time we get a shitty near level, he gets to turn back and flip back around and be like, oh, I don't like them. We should have elected the progressive. And everybody will think that that's where he's always been. They won't look at the fact that he's been part of the problem, and that becomes a worse problem because it's cyclical. It just happens over and over and over again.
And he's only allowed to like say that like once in the show. Like you can't say more about it. The lefty should have won. You know, you're only allowed.
So he's bad on Israel and Palestine. How many people watch him that may be on the fence about Israel and Palestine, and they side with Israel because Sam's a progressive? So clearly, you can be progressive and be pro-Israeli government and then apartheid.
Awesome. I love it. We got to go back and forth. We got to make this interesting, right? So this is my idea with indie media, right? I have an idea that this is just one part of it. So the idea is progressive federation, and this is just a part of it. And this is something I would love the indie media to unite all sides of the spectrum to do this. We have a website, Progressive Federation, where anyone can sign up who wants to run for any district or anything like that. The question is, how do we vet them, right? So we had Colin Orred, who I made the case study recently, that was turned out to be a fake Justice Democrat. He was for Medicare for all in the primary, and then as soon as he won, he dropped it like a bad habit. So I'm thinking.
Sounds like he was a real Justice Democrat.
You said he was already. Okay.
Wow.
That sounds like another conversation for another day. But I think, all right, so.
Mic drop.
He threw me off with my whole train of thought with that one. But yeah. So basically, I want how many people are in Congress? I think it's 435, I believe.
Yeah, something
including
like that.
Senate, something like that, right? So we want people to run, but we don't have enough independent media structure to have. If Niko, 435 people wanted to interview with Niko, how you have to do 2 interviews a day. That's not happening. So I'm thinking, this site, what you would do, you would apply for the site, then you make your own website, make your own campaign paraphernalia, so people know that you're serious. So you got to spend a little bit of money yourself or raise a little bit of money so people know you're serious. And then 2, create a YouTube channel. Why? We would have a list of questions for you that you would have to go through that vetting list. It's going to be called the People's Gauntlet. and you go through, are you for Medicare for all? Are you for universal child care? I want you not only don't just say Medicare for all, yes. Universal, no. I want to hear you passionately speak about about Medicare for all and
That's true.
the benefits of it, because I want you to convince me that you are convinced yourself that Medicare for all is the policy that the United States should be taking up. Gabe, I saw you real quick. You want to jump in real quick?
I was just nodding. I think it's incredible to get people on record making the argument for. Whereas you said, oh, you can say, yes, I'm for Medicare for all. And then you get on stage and you can't defend it properly because you really don't believe in it.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that's an incredible idea that you get people making the real, true arguments. It's cheaper overall when you look at what we spend right now. You're going to get better health outcomes because the U.S. has some of the worst health outcomes. You're going to lower our average mortality rate, which is not top in the world. It's going to help all of these issues, and you can make that argument coherently. Same thing with taxpayer funded college, K through 16 or pre-K through 16. And all these issues one by one, the pro argument, and then
also create a record. You also create a record, right? So like Tulsi did this, and then others started doing this too. Tulsi created a YouTube channel, but what that allowed her to do is correct the record oftentimes where she wouldn't get that space on debate. So what is essentially proposing with like, okay, cool. We don't even have to hit the debate stage. Keep me off of it, but I have a YouTube channel where I could just share all this stuff that I've been talking about consistently for the last 5 years before I ran for this major office. Where have you been on this issue? And if you're as passionate on progressive issues as I am, why weren't you letting people know as constantly as I am? Why were you not ringing the alarm on this every day? And it put people in precarious predicaments because, like y'all said, there are some people who pretend like they're for some of these policies, and then you sit them down and try to like grill them on it. Cause I want to know you can fight for it when you get to that position. Oh man, they don't know what to do. Whenever you make an argument, what about the military budget? You're gonna want to leave us defenseless. They have no idea what to say next. But if you're passionate about this, you've done so much research. You talked about this so much that you shouldn't need to write down a speech. You should just know why it's so important.
So here's the other part of it, because I was watching the Humanist Report, and he was talking about somebody that he interviewed early on as they were running, and then later on he interviewed another progressive in that same district. So he said that other person, he said right now their Twitter is dark, their website is dark, basically saying that this other person that he was currently interviewing has gone a lot further. So that's the thing. When you don't have time to interview people who will just want to be interviewed, and then they fall off the map, 3-6 months later. Jimmy Dore, I heard him say one time that somebody asked him to be interviewed on his show, and he said, okay, where's your website? Couldn't find the man's website. How are you a serious candidate when you don't even have a website? So that's the second part to my idea, is that you have to create your website, create your YouTube channel. We got to vet you, or you would be vetted by your video, and then people on the lower tier, like we're just starting out, and there's a lot of other YouTubers starting out. You go interview with them. We'll see how you do, and if you do a good job, you get a certain amount of points, and now you get interviewed by Niko. If Niko likes you do a good job, okay, now you get interviewed by Kyle, or you get interviewed by TYT, who has a bigger platform, and you can raise money. Yeah. So what you guys think about that?
One of my biggest pet peeves is politician websites, campaign websites that don't have an issues page. And it's a big donate button and no. And I got a little story I wanted to share. So back at the beginning of the Democratic primary, a friend of mine who works in politics said, hey, I know you're a Bernie guy, but I want you to donate $1 or $5 to Julian Castro just so you can make it. Wait. So I go, all right, let me check this guy out. I go look at his website, big donate button, no issues page. And I told him, I said, he doesn't have an issues page. How am I going to give money to have an issues page? And sure enough, within a week, I gave him calls, and he ended up putting up the issues page. I didn't end up agreeing with him, but I did give him the $5 just to get on the debate stage because it's good to have more voices. But at the same time, you can't be a politician and not have a issues page on your website.
I am not surprised Julian Castro didn't have an issues page. There's a pair of legs out there to this day still trying to figure out what exactly Julian Castro stands for. Still out there.
All right. Oh, John, go ahead.
it's also what Niko was saying too. It allows us to create some type of record, right? Like I think the previous point we were talking about how some in the medias are taking the progressive movement and they're like, oh, I'm a progressive, but they don't even know what it is to be a progressive, right? So a lot of these people also coming in and say, I'm going to run as a progressive. We know that there's people there. I'm going to say I'm for Medicare for all. I'm going to say all this stuff, but they don't even know how to explain it. They don't even know.
Andrew Gillum.
Or you could go in there. Or you could go in there, and then next thing you know, like, oh, delete the page. We can't find the page. So, oh, I never said it. So what I meant was, oh, no, there's no records of that. So we need to find a way to take people away from taking advantage of our movement and saying, like, if you really are for this, you need to go on record, and you need to have someone else other than you on that record so we could fact check you and say, okay, here's what you said. Yeah, they may flip, right? People flip. We know when politicians get there, when money get involved, but we have it on record that you know that people are going to call you out on it because it's not going to be something that you can't find anywhere. So I love the idea.
The media loves to call out Trump for his lies, but we don't see them doing it for Biden. So let's discuss the dangers of not calling out Joe Biden.
Yo, let me start off this because I got this quote from 1972 from Hunter S. Thompson talking about the election of Richard Nixon. He said, how many more of these stinking double down and sideshows we have to go through before we can get ourselves straight enough to put together some kind of national election that will give me and the at least 20 million people that I tend to agree with a chance to vote for something instead of always being faced with the all familiar choice between the lesser of two evils. I understand, along with a lot of other people, that big thing this year is beating Nixon. But that was also the big thing, as I recall, 12 years ago in 1960. And as far as I can tell, we've gone from bad to worse to rotten since then. And the outlook is for more of the same. It's the same thing that's been happening.
Yeah, 2016 and 2020. It's still going on today. Is your lesser of two evils keeps getting more and more evil.
Yeah.
So.
It's happening since 1960. It looks like.
Yeah. We're basically full on fascism at this point on all sides. It's scary. When we're looking at what happened with Standing Rock, for example, where literally Native Americans were taken off their land, that there was a legal document, a binding document that gave them that land, and they're being attacked. And Obama promised to protect them before he got elected, and then said, let's see how stuff plays out, man. Let's see how this plays out. But Warren's like, let the workers work. And she's running for president, after getting caught pretending to be a Native American for her own personal agenda. And like, hold on, we're really taking seriously a Rachel Dolezal of the Democratic Party. Like, this is really happening. Oh, okay, wow. So this is really gonna happen. So this is where we're at, where Rachel Dolezal, a man who has dementia, and then damn Donald Trump, who is in the WWE Hall of Fame, are our options, bro. Are you kidding? And everybody, like, and it's, some people joke about it and they're mean, but I don't think people really have internalized how ridiculous we look right now because of this whole lesser of two evils argument.
And then they have the audacity to like try to butter shame us because when we ask for something in return, like, oh, how dare you? How dare you ask for something?
You want free healthcare? Oh, what are you, sick all the time, you pussy? Like, what? Come on, bro. You can't. The thing is too, and here's what the lesser of two arguments has been made for, and it's what it protects and why it's so dangerous. When have we ever got to why we ended up with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? When do we ever, I mean, I talk about it, but even still we get distracted because it has to, cycle moves on. But when do we ever address that? They're like, oh, well, you got to vote for Hillary or Trump. Well, why? And people say you should have voted for Hillary instead of Trump. Well, why were those my options? Because Hillary won. But did she win though? Because by every legitimate metric, historically speaking, there was no mathematical way that Hillary Clinton could have beat Bernie Sanders, and yet somehow she did. And then, obviously y'all know the story about the exit polling, same problems from this one and then some. So why aren't we addressing that? Well, have we addressed the fact that we're still using voting machines that can be easily hacked, that have proprietary software, private software that we can't even access without a court order? Like our own elections that we pay for with our money, we can't access.
And now with the pandemic, they got the mail-in votes. They throwing out 20% of it in New York. They just throwing them out.
Oh man, that's what I'm saying. And that's another thing, right? So the mail-in votes, we don't know what people want to, because Trump doesn't like mail-in votes. They're like, oh, mail-in votes are great. No. If you've paid attention to establishment Democrats, everyone knows that's how they win. That's how they beat primary candidates. They had remember in New York with the district attorney, I wish I could remember her name. In Queens, it was in AOC's district.
Yeah,
she
the one
won
in
the
Queens.
election handedly, and they said basically that the establishment pick came behind and made a impossible victory by basically only winning absentee ballots to win the entire thing.
She won by less than 100 votes or something like that, right? It was like,
yeah, like it was like third. It was the exact amount of absentee ballots that she needed. And also on the other side of that, disproportionately, Caban basically didn't get in. It didn't make any sense. It's like, so nobody knew about who she was. Like, come on. And that's what Nancy Pelosi getting like 70,000 votes in the jungle primary in 2018 before anyone got one because of the absentee ballots. So Dianne Feinstein got 700,000 before anybody else got a single vote because of the absentee ballots. Like, just because Trump said it, but that's my point though. There are people that are just lying. And they lie for their side, but the lesser of two evils argument. That's what the problems get worse. The people who are talking that solving the problems are just getting stupider and stupider, and nothing gets fixed.
I want to push back a little bit on the mail-in vote, because that's similar to a problem I have with people always saying, "Oh, government is terrible," and this and that. With the mail-in votes, it's not the votes, but the people who are counting. With government, every time somebody say government is bad, it's not necessarily just government, but the people who are elected that are in there. So I'm not going to just blame mail-in votes saying that they're bad, because we have multiple states that do it almost exclusively that way. So it just depends on the process and having transparency.
I don't say voting is bad, even though there are a lot of states that get voting bad. But mail-in voting, just Republicans use it in one way, Democrats use it in one way. And like you said, it is absolutely about who's counting the ballots. But we got literally video of people where my team followed the mail-in ballots from one location to the next location. They said, okay, so it was chain of custody problems. Then it was, well, where is this going next? We don't know.
Yeah,
but we don't know. What do you mean?
I don't think I said this yesterday in a tweet. Like, right, like the establishment, they do to progressive what Republicans do to them in the journalists, right? Like Democrats love to cry about like, oh, the Republicans are playing dirty and this. But when it comes to primaries, like there's things that they be doing. It's just like you ask yourself, like, how?
I mean, we see it in real time. And mail-in ballots is one of the methods they use, because who counts them? Like you said, the people who count them are Democrats. They're poll workers that work in a Democratic city. Of course, they're going to cheat if they can, if they get paid to. I witnessed cheating firsthand in Fort Lauderdale, where they were taking ballots out of the thing. And when I tried to call them out on it, I don't know. I just asked them a question politely because I was genuinely confused. They tried to get Donna Brazile, not Donna Brazile, excuse me. She was at the time, Brenda Snipes. It was Brenda Snipes. It was Tim Canova's election. They tried to call her to get the cops to get me out for asking why they were separating ballots out. Wow. And that's with us looking. Those were poll workers observing. So what am I going to do for my team whenever nobody's looking? We can't say with any certainty.
Right. I just want to give you a little pushback on blaming you saying mail-in voters is horrible, because I mean the same thing with the voting machines, like you mentioned earlier. We don't know what kind of code is in there. We don't know what they're doing. So it's not necessarily mail-in voting or absentee ballots are worse than everything.
But I'm saying we can't not scrutinize the mail-in voting.
I agree. There's got to be, no matter what we do, it has to be transparency.
There's like this thing where certain topics on the left are untouchable, right? We can't question anything about it. Mail-in voting. Oh no, you're against mail-in voting. It does help all these people, but that's not the argument that's being made. Nobody's arguing on who it can help. That's the argument being made so that you ignore the problems with it, which you should be addressing at any point. But the moment that they politicize it, and then that gives you the ability to gaslight. So when somebody says, well, election integrity has been an issue historically, remember y'all said it about the Republicans, and then the Republicans said about y'all, then the Democrats said about y'all. This is a thing that we know exists. But the moment that you try to argue what they perceive to be in favor of Trump's argument for mail-in voting, they're like, oh, now there is no problem with mail-in voting. And that's just simply not true.
Well, that's certain factions are saying this because other people are trying to address some of those problems, getting funding for it to make sure all the states have enough ballots. So it's not a universal, the whole establishment is against,
there's going to be enough ballot. There's no funding necessary. There's nobody to fundraise for mail-in ballots because the money is already appropriated by the Secretary of State and when they do the budget. There's no reason that the problem is there can be too much though. How do you there can be too much brought in, there can be too much added, and we saw this happen.
No, I think it was in Wisconsin that they didn't have enough. They couldn't print them enough in time. They didn't. So there is some issues there too. And some people got them late. They couldn't hand them in time, and then they didn't want to count them. So there are problems there money could solve some of them.
But you assume that's not by design.
Well, I'm not assuming it.
I'm
not assuming it because, like I said earlier, whoever is in charge could tip the scales however way they want to. But
but you got to look at races, man. It's like you said, right? Like that Kentucky race, for example, Charles and Amy, right? All of a sudden, all the absentee, there was no absentee.
They all coming.
That got returned. Like there was everything.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, you have, what's her, Caroline or something like that.
Tiffany Caban.
Yeah, and then like 20% all of a sudden are not welcome. They 20%, so it's like, what are you doing? I know it's by state and stuff like that, but like it just makes me, I'm always questioning that because it's just like all of a sudden Amy got
people get randomly dropped from registration. Okay, that's one problem. So the other time, voter machines we know are corrupted. We know they can be hacked. So that's another problem. We know that we know that people get turned away at lines. People will be giving absentee ballots. That's another problem. So to pretend like the mail, like there's literally a problem with every single aspect of our electoral system, and yet when we have the conversation about mail-in ballots, they're like, well, if Trump said it, we can't talk about the negatives of mail-in ballots. But it's like, no, this is a problem because one, it's a problem we need to solve because it's likely going to be the primary way most people are voting just because of the nature of the beast. But so we need to address the problems with it. But now, really neither side, except for surprisingly Donald Trump, wants to address the issues with it because they both planned on using the advantages you can have to cheat with the mail-in ballot.
Well, that's not even Donald Trump. He's just gaslighting. He just talking just because he just gaslighting. He doesn't even come into this conversation.
Trump has actually always been pretty pro-election integrity because he talked about it in 2015, 2016 too. And even though Obama tried to sue Hillary for election fraud, he then comes out and says, we don't have to worry about elections. This was not a third world country. We don't have election fraud here. Now, Trump does use the misnomer and say voter fraud, which assumes that the voter is guilty of trying to manipulate their own personal ballot. And that's not what we see. People try to use that like voter fraud and election fraud interchangeably. You can't do that. But what he says about like dead people voting, that's a thing in California. And progressives know because it gets used against us. It's not the Republicans that it's being used against. It's us. So these are real issues that Trump selects because it is more appealing to his base. You're not gonna get no debate on me about that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make him not issue just because Trump is making the argument. He can be right sometimes. Every squirrel, even the blind squirrel, finds a nut every once in a while.
Yeah, he could be right sometimes, but I don't think he's right in mailing ballots.
Button on this topic real quick, but I definitely think it's the system. I think I did mail-in vote for the first time and it was awesome. I could have put it in my mailbox, but I wanted to make sure it counted. So I went to we have a designated mailbox just for voting that only those mails go in there. And that's
how many people know that? How many people know that? How many people No,
this is in New Jersey. This was only in New Jersey. I don't know how they do it in other states. Matter of fact, in our state, we didn't even have to register. I think in New York, you have to first ask to participate in mail-in vote, and then they give you the ballot. With us, they just gave it to us. But the point I'm trying to make is, as far as the system, that's how it should be. You should be able to just get the mail, the ballot mailed to you. Then we talked about this in a previous episode, where when you vote and it gets counted, you should be able to go to a website and you will get on your ballot. You have a special number that you can write down. And then after your vote gets counted, after the election, you can go to the website, look at your number, and see that vote was counted. And go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think we need open source blockchain voting.
I don't want
everybody to vote from their home.
I'll tell you the truth. As a guy that works in IT, I don't want machines, computers touching my election process. And
But open source literally allows you. So if somebody, because what it does is two things. Because I think we need to do mail-in paper ballots with that, because you still need to be able to send it off for auditing, for hand counting and auditing. But you want speed and accountability, because somebody is going to try and hack it. We can pretend like that doesn't happen, but it does. People get paid to do this stuff. And so when someone does try to hack it, blockchain technology detects the exact source and can trace it back and hold them accountable. So we not only do we know if they hacked it, but we know that at the point where they hacked it and who they were trying to favor.
Sounds fancy, sounds lovely, but this is the reason why I have issues with it is because you have system creep. I'm just making up a term. And what I mean by that, you can set up the system right now. It will work lovely for like 10, 20 years. But guess what? 40 years from now, they find out, hey, you know what? We don't need to count these votes anymore because it's cheaper if we just use blockchain. Then slowly they say, okay, we're just going to use blockchain. Then another 20 years, they find some way to hack it. And I personally think down the line.
You mean like now?
Like now. Exactly. So this is my proposal.
You know we could get done with 40 years of a good election?
So this is my proposal. UK, they do it. Other countries do it fine. All paper ballot. That's all. Make it a huge job program, right? So hopefully down the line we get UBI. If you want to make more money than your UBI, go join the Job Corps or whatever so that you can help count the votes. And you're going to hire a whole bunch of senior citizens and a whole bunch of young people, and they're going to be a ton of people. That's what I'm amazed right now.
But why not have both though? Because I just feel like there needs to be a system of accountability. There has for my piece. Because I don't know where my vote is going. I can put it in paper, I can do whatever, but I know for a fact I've seen it in person. I don't know where that vote is going. Chain of custody is broken.
I agree with that.
All the time the paper ballot.
I agree with that.
Why not do both?
It should be transparent. The counting of the ballots should be transparent. I think we should have webcams on every station. You have three people counting the same ballot so that not just one person is counting that ballot. You have 3 people in a circle with a webcam on top of that. We have the technology to do this. So full transparency, we have, I was about to say Amazon Cloud, but I don't want to have to use Amazon Cloud. But, we can set up a system where every vote gets counted and it goes up and you can watch it later on. And as long as it doesn't
and then the power goes out in that area, then what?
The power goes out. Well, they're counting.
You're a conspiracy theorist.
No. I hear you. They're counting it by hand.
We just broke the chain. But if the power goes down in the area, we can't see their webcam, then what?
Recount.
You have the 3 people in the circle who count that one.
Oh, but
ballot.
if you want to recount, you'll be considered a conspiracy theorist because, just because the power went out, you think they would break the law? People
that's a different topic because I don't care what they call me.
That's not a different topic.
I don't care what they call me. They could call me a conspiracy theorist.
But most people, but other people take it personal, so they don't want to go against the grain. So you just have one instance of that, and they get away with it.
Okay, that's in the rule.
Again, see if it works.
That's in my system. As soon as there's a power outage, automatic recount by hand. You don't have to worry about conspiracy theories.
Listen, we're going to have problems, man, because next time we have Niko on, I got to talk first. He keeps stealing all my points, man.
Oh, my bad.
Yo, let's move on.
Hey, you got some good election integrity points. I'm going to love to hear it.
Last episode, I talked about how Microsoft is working on an open source way to do the elections as well. So I talked about it in the last episode. But also, there is downfalls to the blockchain because blockchain has been manipulated before. I've seen double accounting done before. Or read about. So nothing is perfect. So
paper ballot, baby.
I need
that's why you have both.
Transparency. Yeah.
I love it.
There's gotta be.
Go ahead.
There gotta be ways, man, because just like you know how it is, right? You even with like when you speed and they give you your license number, you got a ticket. You got to go online.
Exactly. There's got to be a way to do
this. That could say like, here's my number, my vote. Like I have like 4 or 5 friends that I talked to that they were like, oh yeah, we mail in our vote, and then we realized they didn't count because something went in and something like that. Election is over. Think about the thousands and the millions of people that could easily happen. Yeah. I should be able to see that if you're going to say whatever works, but we talked about this in the last episode. It's like neither party want to make it easier for people to vote. It's in their best interest to just make it as difficult as possible just because that's what they want to do.
Exactly. So let's go on to the last topic. That is the think tank policy discussion. So this is where we save the world. This is my idea. So we have police who wear webcams. And we have seen how it worked wonders in the Discord for trying to get police reform. My idea is to give politicians body cameras so that we can see how they negotiate deals, the lobbyists they talk to, how they conduct themselves in Congress. I'm going to throw that out there and get feedback, and then I'll continue giving my piece.
Yeah, what I thought about this was, all these people, they run in the same circles, the lobbyists and the politicians. So they're just going to go to little Timmy's birthday party and talk about it there, so it's not going to change a lot in that aspect. But I do like the idea in theory because it could still have another record, because even when you have transcripts, like the White House transcripts of things that went on, they go change it to say, oh, well, what he meant was, so at least we have another form of backup for at least for official meetings. But when we want to see how the sausage is made, we're not really going to see it regardless, because we're not going to be in the golf course with them.
I was just going to say that even though they'll be making deals at their kids' birthday parties or on the golf course, like they're already doing that anyway. So it's not like that's going to change. But I will say that you will be obstructing them a lot by making politicians wear body cams, because basically, yeah, you're right. They might have to prolong that discussion, but then something else comes up. They have to prolong that discussion again. And you're prolonging that discussion with lobbyists generally, right? You're prolonging, because if we do the politicians, it probably has to be the staff too, at least.
Yeah. We got to do that.
And the staff is the ones who are passed down that legislation from the corporations and the lobbyists to introduce it into Congress and go through these committees. And so, yeah, we might not see maybe some of the worst stuff, but the day-to-day living, we're going to be like, okay, so this is how you move. This is how you get down. This is your logic and reasoning behind why you make the decisions you make. Oh, you got to go. Because you don't even have to pass a by policy, but I know when it's coming. I don't got to learn from somebody else. I don't have to learn from my own mistakes. I learn from other people's. So I think it would be actually pretty good utility to have, even if they try to come up with other ways to get around it. But I think that would just further expose them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna definitely agree with that point. So, but we know that they're not going to do that. People would they'll be like, no way.
Look, come on, man. That's not the point of this subject, man. They got a lot of work to do.
I know, but
you know what I'm saying? We're going to give them a lot of work.
I know, but we got to keep it real,
Ask
too.
AOC to introduce it, man. She loves surveillance.
Police departments, I got to look into the history of how police cams even came into play, because I'm curious. Because I would have never, before it happened, I would have said exactly what John just said. What? Police going to wear body cams on when they got to wear it even when they go? Actually, I don't know if they go to the bathroom. They go to the bathroom if they still got to keep it on. I think they could turn it off. But I would have never thought that it would have happened. And now we see all the
corruption. Only happened in certain states.
I'm sorry.
How many of them will be like, oh, the police camera during that time didn't work?
Well, that's happened already. But Niko, what was that point you just said?
Well, I was saying it's only in certain states. So you're talking about but that would basically be a federal law, and you would have to get them to pass it. So it's a whole different thing. Oh. Like if you ask the police to put body cams on themselves, they'd be like, "You ask me that again, I'm gonna shoot you in the middle of a traffic ticket."
But it happened. It happened. How did it get happen? How did it?
Because it wasn't the police voting to put body cams on themselves. You're asking for the politicians in Washington to vote on putting body cams on themselves as they're corrupt.
With anything,
I have a different angle. I don't think it'll solve it, because even while they're in the office, they all have cell phones, they all have paper, they could be passing notes back and forth. You can see a lot of uptick in the usage of like those encrypted apps. I think it's called Signal and stuff like that, where there's
I think you might be giving too much credit. They're stupid. I think you might be giving too much credit.
I agree.
Hey man, they got young staffers though. They'll put them out.
But have you seen the questions they be asking when they have to talk to those executives from those like companies that like?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Those questions, you're like, what? Like,
and also, that's what happened with the police department. You see them. Literally, we've caught police planting drugs on people. Right? We literally see them putting their knee on people's neck with the body cameras. So even though there are cops that's smart enough to shut it off and there are those cases that come through the cracks that reveal corruption, that God knows there were people that was thanking God that it was on camera when somebody planted drugs on them.
I mean, not that it makes the difference sometimes, because also it's not only having the cameras, it's also getting access to the footage, because some of the police unions, they have put into their rules that they have to wait a certain amount of days, so they have to do internal investigation. So it's not till months later where we see body cam footage of whatever happened.
But it still was there, though.
Politicians would use Patriot Act. The politicians would use the Patriot Act. Oh, sorry, we can't talk about this. It's Top secret stuff.
But we've seen
National
outrage, public outrage come from body cam or cop car footage. Months later, it could be a year later, it becomes revealed, and everybody's up in the arms for that.
Listen, I'm of the camp that better than nothing. Even if it doesn't fix everything, it will help out. And on the flip side too, for the good cops, it helps them, because if somebody tries to say, "Oh, he punched me in the face while I was just trying to get my license," they'll have it on camera saying that it was a lie. So the good cops at least could have some kind of evidence that they're whatever.
At least the office of the inspector general, would always have access, right? Because they get to supersede certain protections. Like the office of the inspector general was able to go through the briefings, the Mueller report, all that stuff before we ever got to see it, and that allowed him to make the judgment that even though he didn't like Trump, Andrew McCabe was guilty of obstruction, James Comey was guilty of obstruction, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we might, like what you said, we might not see it initially, but if that officer of inspector general who's supposed to hold them accountable sees some of their footage, he can start putting stuff out there that would say, okay, yeah, they can't watch this part of the footage, but they can watch this part where they made this particular deal.
Exactly. See, here we are saving the world at the end of the episode. This is episode 3 again in the can with the man Niko House. I want to thank Carlito. I want to thank Gabe, and I want to thank John for doing it again. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that. And we're out here making voters smarter. Thank you. Have a great day.